Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on what time it is for you. It's morning here, where I am. My name is Jack. I am the lead author support specialist here at BookFunnel, and I will be taking you guys through today's webinar. We're going to be talking about mailing list surveys today and how you can use them to get to know your readers better. And this is a topic that came up due to the Facebook group. I had mentioned this because I use surveys in my newsletter. I had mentioned this to someone. Let's see, is Emma here? Is Emma with us today? I have to look through everybody. There's so many people joining that I can't find Emma if she's in the list here. Maybe she is. I'm not sure Emma is here today. But Emma, she's one of our author support specialists, and I was bragging, I guess, about the surveys that I was using. Not, nothing too crazy, but she mentioned it to somebody, and then somebody in the Facebook group was like, "What is this? What is this survey I hear about that you're using?" And so I had to, okay, we'll do a webinar on it because there seemed to be some interest, and it is a very, very useful tool for authors. Your newsletter. Oh, here's Emma. There we go. I knew she would join us eventually. So now that I've already talked about her, she won't, right? Anyway, let's see. We still have a lot of people rolling in here. So I'm going to give everybody just a couple minutes and get maybe a couple of housekeeping things out of the way here before we dive in, because we've got a lot of people still rolling in. But surveys, right? That's how we got to this topic. That's why we're here today. And like I said, your newsletter is one of the most powerful tools you have at your disposal as an author to begin with. And surveys just, add a little extra juice, really, in ways you might not expect. And there's lots of different ways to use surveys that might surprise you, but they're pretty versatile too. And we're going to talk about a lot of different things related to those. A couple things I should mention just before we do dive in. Today's session is being recorded. If you signed up via Calendly, you will receive a link tomorrow that's going to go out, which is to bookfunnel.com/videos. That is where our replays are being added to now, directly on BookFunnel. And on your dashboard, even you should be able to find the basically up at the top right hand corner. We added a little button there to take you to the videos section that takes you to the BookFunnel video library, so you can go check that out. And it has past sessions for our orientations, our webinars, our Q&As, and all that stuff. We're adding some of the older stuff in there too. It's mostly some of the recent ones, but we have quite a few older webinars and Q&As that we want to add there, so that it's going to become sort of a complete library of everything that we've done with these webinars. But for now, it's going to have more of the recent stuff, and we'll get this webinar and then later today's Q&A, we'll get those added by the end of the day today. So if you don't want to wait for the link to show up in your email inbox tomorrow, you can just maybe check later this evening. I think usually, and Kelly, maybe you can, in the Zoom chat here, let everybody know when you think you'll have them ready, because Kelly is the one who gets those uploaded. Around what time, we can we can expect those to be live on the BookFunnel videos page. But usually Kelly's pretty prompt, so I'm not trying to put her on the spot here, but it should be by the end of the day today they'll be available. So yes, that's the plan. So I think things are slowing down here a little bit in terms of the participants joining. So I think well, maybe not. There's a slew of even more jumping in right as I said that. But we do need to get going here. The only other thing I guess I will mention is that, yes, there is a Q&A later today. That will be at 2 p.m. Central Time. That is in 3 hours, right? It is 11 a.m. for me right now in Central Time. So do the math for you based on your time zone. Um, and okay, Kelly said around 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We is when those videos should be uploaded to the BookFunnel videos page, which is awesome. Yes, we by the way here at BookFunnel, we are a multi-time zone company as well. So most of us are in Central time, but then we have some Eastern and Pacific, and it's all over the place. But we make do. So, all right, I think now I don't want to jinx it, but I think we've gotten to the point where we have where participants are slowing down. We don't have a whole lot more joining, so I think we're ready to go. One thing I should also mention, you might tell from the sound of my voice, I have come down with something. Probably one of my kids gave it to me. I should be fine. Hopefully I don't start, you know, hacking up a lung here, but just I appreciate your understanding if I have to take a brief moment to take a drink or something as I go along. But I should be fine, and don't worry about me. All right. But by the way, also questions, we will get to those at the end of today's session. In fact, let's cover what we're going to cover. So why should you use surveys in the first place? We're going to talk about that. Also, some different tools that you have to choose from when it comes to newsletter surveys, some use cases. We're going to talk about crafting your first survey, some of the things you should take into account. And then we're actually going to go and I'm going to show some examples of surveys that I've built. And then also we'll have the opportunity to just build some live here at the end of the webinar. If there's something that you want to see, we'll be able to do that. Today, we will be using MailerLite just for simplicity. There's lots of different survey tools out there. And so this is not to say that you have to use MailerLite for this sort of thing. We'll talk about some of the different tools you have at your disposal. Obviously, there's Google Forms, there's lots of other ones. What your mailing list service will typically have something that you can use. So you don't have to use MailerLite. That's just what we're using today for simplicity. And there's usually a lot of overlap in terms of the functionality of different survey tools that are out there. Right, but we will actually be able to open up that MailerLite window and I can show you how I build some of those things. If you want to see how a certain question template could be created, how you could do that in theory, drop that in the comments or any other questions you have, and we'll get to those at the end. So why should you use surveys? Obviously, if you're here at this webinar, you probably don't need to be convinced, but just in case you do, right? If you're wondering, what is this all about? What's the big deal? Convince me, Jack. Why should I use surveys? Well, for one, this is a chance to get to know your readers. And knowing who your readers are and what they like and dislike, what attracted them to your books, and all of that stuff, this is going to be one of the best ways you have to find more readers like them, right? You may have an idea of what your readers are like, right, and what interests them. You may have an idea of what attracted them to your books, initially, but you may be surprised. So it's important to get to know your readers and ask them. Now, once you know more about them, you can cater to their interests in the content that you provide in your newsletter, right? So this makes your newsletter more effective in the long run because they are going to be getting essentially what they expect or what they want from your newsletter down the road. And so this means you're going to get more responsiveness from your subscribers, right? If maybe you're putting out a call to action for something, all right? Your subscribers are going to be more responsive to that. You're going to get more sales. You're going to get more reviews, right? Theoretically, going down this road, if you know how to cater to their interests, right? So it's a multi-step process. It's not immediate. It's not magic. You don't wave a magic wand and boom, more sales, right? Surveys just automatically give you more sales. No, over time, you gather that information and now you know what your readers are looking for and you can cater to that and you can shift in that direction. Surveys turn your newsletters into a two-way exchange as well. So typically, when you're sending a newsletter to your subscribers, a lot of the time, I imagine. I catch myself doing this sometimes myself. It's very like uh kind of, it's me, I, right? From the author, right? I'm doing this. I released this book. You know, that sort of thing. And they're getting spoon-fed that information. But when you have a survey in your newsletter on a regular basis, this gives those subscribers a chance to engage, to provide feedback, and ultimately to feel invested, right, in your newsletter, which might sound like an odd thing to say, but it's a communication tool that so therefore it should go back and forth two ways. Now, obviously, your subscribers could just reply to that email, right? They could hit reply and they could email, and many subscribers will do that. I'm sure you have a lot of your subscribers who do that. And that's actually one thing that you can do. It's not technically in the same category, but you can ask them to just email you, reply to this email, that sort of thing. You can definitely do that. That's a very simple way to do that sort of thing and ask them a question or something like that. But surveys are just so much easier. They don't have to go out of their way to draft an email and send it. It's just a much simpler way to get that information and feedback from them and open up that two-way exchange of communication. So if your readers, if they're opening up your emails and they're just reading what's there, and maybe there's a free book that they click on and they go download, or maybe you're sharing some promos and swaps, or maybe you're recruiting for your ARC team, eventually all of that information can kind of just start to go in one ear and out the other, because they're not really necessarily doing anything, right? And a survey is such low hanging fruit, right? Even very like simple casual surveys, right? Surveys where you're not necessarily even fishing for information, right? But simply asking them, like, what their favorite author is in a certain genre or something like that, right? It gets them to engage. And when they open your email, if you do this regularly, they're going to expect that they're going to have the opportunity to do something in there, not just, absorb a bunch of information, right? So it's a very different behavior that happens and occurs when you have surveys in your newsletter, right? They're going to be engaging with your newsletter, not simply absorbing the information, right? And that's a big deal, right? That's a big deal. Right? So, which survey tool is for you? There's a few different tools that are available. A few is an understatement. There are tons and tons. Who am I kidding? There are tons of tools out there for you to use for surveys. First of all, your mailing list will probably have survey tools already available, and this makes it really easy and seamless to implement this into your newsletter. Like I said, we are going to be using MailerLite today for an example, right? To just show quickly and easily how this could look. But MailChimp and ConvertKit, they can all do that. Whatever mailing list service you have, they probably have some sort of survey feature. Mailing list services are pretty competitive with each other, so they like to match each other's features wherever they can. However, if yours doesn't happen to have survey tools available, or maybe not quite the tools that you're looking for, you don't necessarily have to jump ship to a totally different service, right? So I do want to touch here on a couple of other options you have. For one, and the one that everybody's going to mention, I'm sure, Google Forms, right? Google Forms are a great option. They are pretty simple to set up. There are some limitations in what you can do with them to an extent, but they're very reliable, and they are excellent in terms of their general use cases, right? So they're still a great option. Maybe your mailing list service, maybe the survey tools there just you don't jive with those, then I would recommend looking at Google Forms first. It's a basic option. It's simple as well, right? There's a lot of complex tools out there. If you're a little bogged down with all of that and you just want to start with something simple, Google Forms might be the way to do it, right? And I should say, you don't have to use any one of these exclusively. You might find that your built-in mailing list tools are really useful for certain things, but you like Google Forms or another third-party service for something else. So I should mention that, right? Now, third-party survey tools other than Google, there's tons of them out there. I'm just going to name drop a few of them. Survey Monkey, Typeform, Wufoo, Survey Gizmo, Soho. There's a whole bunch of them. I think one of their names might have actually changed recently under new management or something like that. But these are just some examples. There are tons of options out there, and there's different pros and cons with each of them. So if you're looking for tools out there that give you lots of control over different things, right? You can, I think that's supposed to be, well, no, well, I might have, is that Zoho? I think I might have misspelled that. Anyway, I got, that's my author eye there. I'm line editing as I'm reading it. Anyway, so lots of options out there for you to choose from. Integration with your mailing list service can also be available in some cases, which is really useful because that allows you to really get the maximum out of your surveys when you can say, add them to a new list, or segment them, or add a tag to them when they answer a survey, when they've completed it, or when they've answered it in a certain way, or they've given a certain answer. That can then let you further target them. And that's really where the rubber meets the road here, is that you can dial in and figure out how you can target these specific readers based on the feedback that they've given you. Okay? So there's lots of different tools available. I recommend you check them out. Starting with your mailing list service is probably the easiest way to go. Just see what tools are available there, but maybe you prefer something like Google Forms or another service instead. So some use cases here, and a few things to think about, right? What would I use this for? Maybe you're wondering, like, how would I use this? This all sounds great. You're making a lot of promises, but what are some of the things I can use this for? Right. So one question that I like to ask my subscribers is, why are you on my list? Right. So are your subscribers on your list because they love your books and they're anticipating your next release or something like that? Or is it that they really just stick around because you share promos every now and then and they can get some free books? Right? Why are they there on your list to begin with? If, like most authors, you have a variety of different content in your newsletter, it's important to know what it is they're there for. Why are they sticking around? This is a very simple question that you can ask. This is something that you can even have in, say, a new subscriber survey that focuses specifically on, right, people who are new to your list, perhaps even in your welcome sequence, to kind of filter people early on as to, why are you here? Is it just because I gave away a free book? You got my reader magnet, it was a free book, great. Or are you really interested in, the world I'm writing in? Or are you really interested in the topic that I'm writing about, right? What have you. Another use case is to give you a better informed sending frequency. Asking your subscribers how often they want to hear from you, for example. Right? If you're not already doing this, find out, right? Do they want to hear from you on a weekly basis? Are they okay with that? Do they want to hear from you maybe once a month at most? You can get this kind of information from them just by asking the question. And again, this is a great one for new subscribers to your list. I know I personally send my newsletter out fairly frequently. In fact, I send emails to my list multiple times a week. You don't necessarily have to do that, right? But this is one thing I've started to do. Some of my subscribers might not want to receive all that information. Maybe they just want a sort of digest at the end of the month with everything that happened, right? Over the course of the month, with all that information in a more consolidated way. And so you can do that for them, and you can provide that for them. And this can lead to some greater retention in your mailing list. If they don't feel like you're bugging them all the time, they're getting your newsletter at the frequency that they prefer, right? That they would rather receive it in, then that can be helpful in that respect as well. Series progress. So it can sometimes be hard to know how many of your subscribers have actually read your books, right? How many of them are just there because they downloaded your reader magnet and you're on their TBR, but they haven't read book one or something like that? I myself, I have a fairly long series of about 9 books and counting that I've written, and I know that some of my readers have just downloaded the reader magnets and they haven't read book one yet. And some of them have read the whole series and they're waiting for more. But if I can find a way to distinguish that and even update that later on when they have completed it, that's great. That tells me, okay, right, this is where you're at. And for those readers who haven't, maybe they've only got the reader magnet, I can communicate to them specifically maybe some information that is going to entice them into starting the series. And for those who have completed the series, well, they're probably more interested in new releases, right? And what's coming next, right? What am I writing next? And the same thing applies to nonfiction as well. You can do the same sort of thing. Maybe you only have, maybe you don't necessarily have a series when it comes to nonfiction, obviously, but maybe there's sort of you want to measure their progress nonetheless and see who is engaging with your books and to what degree. So you can apply this to fiction, to nonfiction, to children's books, what have you, right? You might have to think outside the box a little bit here in some cases, but to get that idea of how far have they progressed, and then how you can target them based on that later on. This also is an opportunity for you to get honest feedback. Right? I think I'm covering, my head is covering this up on Facebook. Let me change that here real quick. There we go. For those of you watching on Facebook, now you can see. What do your subscribers think of your books? Right? Just ask them. This is actually what kind of sparked this whole thing, because one of my surveys that I often include is simply asking them, how would you rate book one, right, in my series? And they have the opportunity to give it a star rating right there in my newsletter. And then from there, I can, depending on how they answer that question, I put them into one of two buckets. And then everybody in bucket number one over here gets added to an automation, and I follow up with them. And everybody in bucket number two over here, they get added to a separate list. And that's that, right? That's actually what started this whole thing. But there's other ways you can get feedback too, right? And identifying your super fans, the ones who really love your writing, right? Who are your target reader, right? When you need to hype up a new release or you want to recruit for your review team, it really makes it easy when you've identified these readers, and maybe as a portion of your list, maybe that's not a huge number, right? If you have 1,000 subscribers on your list and this list of super fans that have given you this feedback, maybe there's only 20 or 30 of them, but still, that's 20 or 30 readers that if you send them something specific, if you reach out to them directly, that they're going to be very responsive to what you have to say. So that's very powerful. And also here, developing a reader profile. We've kind of touched on this, but this is really underrated, right? Things like, what age are your readers, right? Maybe you want to ask that question, maybe not. That's maybe a brave question to ask, right? But still, right? Or at least an age range is fine, right? What's the gender ratio of your readers? It might surprise you, right? Maybe you do write in a genre that stereotypically is, predominantly one gender or the other, but you might be surprised that there's maybe more readers of the opposite gender than you'd expect, or maybe it's fairly 50-50. You don't know, right? But you don't know until you ask, right? What are their favorite authors? A lot of this stuff is very useful for ads targeting. I should mention, if we're talking about things like Facebook ads, right? If they have a favorite author in your genre, right, you'd want to know that information, because if they love that author's books and they love your books, right? And there's probably other readers out there who feel the same way. They love that author and they'll love what you write. And this gives you some targeting information that you can then use in advertising later on. All of this really is. And then also their preferred reading method. This is one that it's not always relevant necessarily, right? For a lot of you who are maybe in, KU, right? So all your books are on Amazon. It might still be worth it though to know, right, what percentage of your readers just don't buy from Amazon, right? And maybe that gives you some, maybe it is 99% of your readers come from Amazon, and that's great. There's no real impetus there for you to necessarily change or pivot, but maybe you do have 20 to 30% of your subscribers who would prefer to use another platform. Right? Maybe they would prefer to buy from Barnes and Noble or Kobo or another store or from you directly, whatever the case might be. And then you can determine from there, okay, maybe I should expand into and offering some things on these other platforms. Maybe I need to pivot into or out of KU, right, whatever it might be. And then also, when we're talking about reading method here, we're not just talking about the platform, but it's good to know, right? Do they read on a mobile phone? Do they read on a dedicated e-reader? Do they prefer to read in paper? Right? This is another big one, right? Maybe if you have all your books out there in ebook, but there's some of your readers who are waiting for the paperbacks to be available and you don't have those ready yet. Well, that might be a wake up call. I know it is for me personally. I'm saying this from experience because that's what happened to me, right? Is that I've gotten comments from readers saying, when are these going to be available in paperback? I'm like, oh, sheesh, I've been dragging my feet in that regard. So, things like that, where you can find out from them, from the horse's mouth, right? What is their preference, right? And all of this with the intent here being used for targeting in the future. So if you're going to go about crafting your first survey, this can seem like a daunting task, right? There's a lot to do. So first off, you want to start with a goal in mind. What is it that you want the survey to achieve? Are you wanting to figure out, for example, that reader profile that we just talked about? Maybe you are looking to get more reviews. Maybe that's your goal right now, is to get more reviews for your book, or have sort of a way to sort through your readers and find out who is interested in being on your advanced reader team, or something like that, right? Whatever the goal might be. Is your goal instead maybe to get some more data for ad targeting, right? Now you can have some overlap in terms of your goals here. It's not that you just have to pick one or the other and just stick with one. You can get some information for a variety of different goals, and there will always be some overlap, but you should have in mind what is it you're trying to accomplish and take that into account from the beginning. And that leads us to choosing your questions. What is it you're going to ask them? You need to consider this carefully. If you ask them the wrong questions, it's not going to be particularly helpful, right? So, for example, using the example that I just gave from my newsletter, where they could rate book one in my series on a star rating scale, excuse me, that's it's a direct crossover to reviewing the book on, say, Amazon or what have you, because that's where they'll give a star rating as well. And so it's one for one, right? It's a direct crossover. If instead I had asked them, do you like my book? Well, that's a more open-ended question, right? Just as an example. And so you want to be very careful in how you choose your questions. You want to be specific enough that you get the data and information that you're looking for, without being you know, too specific, right? To the point where the information isn't really useful. Right? So another example might be, you might be asking them, and I'll show, I think I have an example prepared for this one later on, which is, what social media platforms do you use, right? Something like that. And maybe you have a social media presence on certain platforms already, right? But if you're asking them, are you on Facebook, or are you on TikTok or Instagram, right? But you don't include YouTube or Twitter slash X, or other platforms that they might be on, you're not going to really have the full picture, right? If you're only asking limited information. So you want to consider those things because it might surprise you, right? Maybe, and social media platforms do vary in terms of gender as well. So if you have predominantly female readers in your audience, they might be more likely to be on Instagram as opposed to, say, YouTube. Right? YouTube tends to be more male dominated in terms of the user base. Right? So there's things like that to consider, but you don't want to make any assumptions. I myself, I personally am a YouTube junkie, right? I'm on YouTube a lot as a user myself. And so I might think, because I'm a YouTube user, oh, yeah, my readers are probably on YouTube too. More of my readers are probably on Facebook, actually. I write space opera, military sci-fi. My audience is probably a little bit older than I am, actually. And so is what I found just over gathering some data. And so they're actually more likely to be on Facebook. And my presence on Facebook is terrible, right? So there's a real world example there for you. I need to focus more on that platform is what I've learned. And you can get that sort of information out of these questions. But if you're not asking the right questions, you're not going to get the information that's useful in the first place. Right? Determine how you're going to deliver the survey, right? When is the best time to prevent this or present this to them rather, right? Is this going to be an evergreen survey that just lives in your newsletter? There's lots of advantages to that. Or is this going to be short term, something you're going to send out once or twice and get responses and then act on it, right? So an evergreen survey could be something that's, for example, in your welcome sequence, and everybody goes through that one. You are continually getting more data added to that survey. You know what your readers are looking for, all of that sort of thing. That is one way to use a survey, or even having one in your newsletter that just gets sent out every time. By the way, right, if it's in your newsletter, I know in MailerLite and many other mailing list services, you can do the same thing. You can actually hide a survey from a subscriber once they've answered it. So that way you can keep it in your newsletter. You can send it out every time and know that people who have already answered it aren't going to see it over and over again and get, bothered by it and get frustrated and unsubscribe or anything like that. You won't have to worry about that because it's hidden from them. So you can do that with an evergreen type of survey. But maybe you need more, short-term answers to your questions. Maybe your question is more specific than it is broad. And so you just want to get a good sampling of data from your subscribers. And in fact, maybe in the campaign that you're going to be sending out with the survey is going to be the main content of that campaign. Whereas an evergreen survey might just live somewhere in your newsletter, mixed in with some other things. It might not be front and center. Whereas a short-term survey might be the main thing that you're trying to get across. In fact, even in your subject line of that campaign, it might be more prominent there as well. So you need to determine this and decide, am I wanting to gather information over time, which is probably going to be useful in the majority of cases, or do I need to know something right now? And I think that will kind of tell you how you're going to present this to them, right? Things like if they're a new subscriber, you're asking those questions about newsletter sending frequency, why they're on your list. I think that's a great time to ask some of those questions, getting to know them, like who are your favorite authors, that sort of thing. It's a great time to do that sort of stuff. Right? But you can also do that later too. So don't feel like if you haven't been doing it that you can't implement it now. There's lots of ways to do it. It's best to be consistent, right? And then have a plan to follow up, right? What are you going to do once you have all this data? It's great if you know what all their favorite authors are, wonderful. What are you going to do with that data then later on? Are you going to implement that into your ad targeting on Facebook? Or, if you're asking for feedback, maybe let's use that star rating example again that I gave. If someone in that survey rates your book as 5 stars, what are you going to follow up with? Right? What's going to be the next step? What happens after that? It should go beyond just the survey question itself. And you should have a plan for that. What's going to be the next step that you're going to take? Is this going to put them into a new segment or list in your mailing list? Is this going to initiate an automation? Right? Sometimes there's additional setup required and all of that stuff too. So it's best to have all of that prepared somewhat in advance, right? So by the time you're implementing the survey, if you have follow-up questions, maybe you're going to send them an additional survey. Maybe you're going to have an automation that triggers, that's asking them to, prompting them to go write a review or rate your book or what have you. All those kinds of things, you need to have that set up and ready to go from the beginning, so that you're getting that data and putting it to use right away. So obviously, there's probably plenty of questions here. I do have some examples that I want to show that aren't directly in this presentation. So I do need to switch the window that I am sharing here, which might take me here just a moment. But if you do have questions, go ahead and drop those in the comments on Zoom or Facebook. We will get to those shortly here. Let me make sure I am choosing the correct window here in Zoom. Yep, there we go. Okay, now I just got to get Facebook switched over here. And we will go through some of these examples, and then we'll get to questions here in just a moment. We can also build a survey as well from the ground up if you want to see how you would implement some things. So this right here is just an example of a new subscriber survey. This is not going to be exhaustive by any means. I don't have absolutely everything in here. This is just an example, right? So if there's something missing from this, right, don't shoot me. This is just a quick and dirty example of how you might do this. So obviously we have, it's sometimes good to have a button that goes along with your survey. Buttons, people click on buttons, right? That should be obvious, but I recommend this for other things that you have in your newsletter as well, be it a group promo link that you want people to click on, maybe a link to your book where it's for sale, something like that. Include a button along with it because people click on buttons, right? Now this survey is on a landing page, but in MailerLite, you can embed this directly into your newsletter. So you imagine, all the content in a newsletter above and below this would be there as well, but this could just be embedded in that. So if we click begin, here's that first question, right? Why are you a subscriber? Or you can phrase that however you want. Why are you on my list? Is it because you love my books? I signed up for the freebies, or maybe it's a little bit of both. Maybe they're like, well, I do love your books, and I like the freebies that I get every now and then, and I like both of those. Now, this might be a phrase a little more toward your existing subscribers, right? So, for example, maybe if they were a brand new subscriber, you might phrase this a little differently. But if you haven't been collecting this data, you can definitely ask this question to your existing subscribers as well, right? Why are they there? Right? Why are they in your newsletter? Right? Do they like to read your blog posts that you share? What is the content specifically that they are sticking around for? So we're going to assume, of course, that they love our books, right? I do want to note here that I do usually recommend giving people the ability to go back to the previous question in case they misclick and answer, unintentionally a certain way. So I do recommend that you give them that ability to do so. Different survey tools, right, will give you different levels of control over that. In MailerLite specifically, this is something that you can turn on and allow people to do, or you can leave it off and they have to just answer the questions in order. They can't go back and change their answer, right? So they love our books. Now, the next question here, how often do you want to hear from me? And this is, again, something that you can rephrase however you think it would work for you. But, maybe you want to give them the option to hear from you whenever, right? This is, you can phrase this carefully, but I've kind of made this intentionally vague because this is maybe for the type of subscriber who's like, it doesn't bother me, right? That's the kind of subscriber that I'm putting this question in here for. And then maybe they want to hear from you only once a week at most, or maybe every other week or once a month. And again, tailor this to your own newsletter frequency. If you send your newsletter monthly, well, this might look a little different, right? Maybe instead of asking the frequency, maybe you might also ask, do you want to hear about new releases, free books? What are the different types of things you want me to tell you about, right? And then I can include that information, right, for example. Right. So we'll just assume here that this is okay with them and they select that answer. This is another example of a matrix style question, right? Where I had to think about this one and how to put this one to use because it's honestly, when you look at it, it can be a little overwhelming. So maybe not always useful, but this is just an example of how you could use this type of question. Obviously, we have, not interested, might be interested to definitely interested here, and a few different categories. So new releases, are they interested in that? Oh yeah, they're probably, definitely interested. And you might not be able to tell here because this circle is when you click on it, it doesn't really it's maybe one of the downsides of this option with MailerLite specifically. You'll see these circles have this gray outline, and then when you click on them, that outline goes away. I think I needed to change some other setting in here, but you can see that I have the option to be like, oh yeah, I'm really interested in bonus content and free books and maybe your blog. It sounds interesting. And then that data can all get saved later. And you can then determine from that, okay, what are people really interested in and what do they want to hear about? And maybe even provide, your blog posts just to the people who, say they might be interested or are definitely interested. And if somebody says, no, I'm not interested in that, you can just not show them that content in your newsletter. You can find a way to do that so that they don't have to see it then if they're not interested in it. Now, this here really should say submit, uh, right? Is what that should say here. But now we also have the option to just have them answer, or rather ask you a question, right? So one question you'd like to ask me, right, as an author, right? What's your favorite flavor of ice cream? Maybe that's what they really want to know. Probably if you write nonfiction books based around ice cream, that might actually be a relevant question. But whatever question, you might be relevant. This is great for a lot of different things, right? And so, asking open questions is something that I'd encourage you to do as well. If you do any sort of like Q&A with your subscribers, or maybe you like to do like a question of the week segment where people can submit questions to you and then you answer them and include that in your newsletter or maybe on social media, something like that. This is a great way to incorporate that into your newsletter, right? And that's the end of this survey here. That's just a few examples, but we're going to go over to a feedback survey, and we have some different examples here of some types of questions that you can ask where you're getting direct feedback, right? So again, we've got the begin button here. And so here's that question I was referring to before. How would you rate book one? Right? Usually it's best to have a picture of the book to go along with this so they know, oh yeah, that book. I really liked that book. It was 5 stars. Oh, great, right? Go write a quick review if you don't mind. This is just an example here of what you could do, right, with that. And then they could click here. That could take them to where they could go write a review of your book. Now, if I reload the page here, I think that's what I'll have to do. Now, let's say, oh, yeah, see, it remembers my response. And that's the tricky part here. But I have a different example. Unfortunately, I'll see if I can get this loaded back up here in a minute here. But if they say, they rate it 1 star, be like, well, thanks for your feedback, I really appreciate that. You don't, you can respond to them differently based on their answer. Obviously, if somebody's going to rate your book as a 1 star, you're probably not going to want to encourage them to go write a review. And the reason for that is that they're probably not your target audience, so don't feel guilty about this, right? Don't feel that you have to, encourage. Obviously, it's different if you're giving everybody, sending out an arc to a group of readers, and you're encouraging honest reviews. I'm not saying to encourage dishonesty among your reviewers, but rather, if you're asking for feedback in this way, you can take those readers who really did enjoy your books and prompt them to go write a review. And the readers who didn't, just know that they're probably not your target readers. And so you don't have to go out of your way to ask them to write a review, right? Or anything like that. Right now, opinion surveys. I got a few more examples here. So let's go through these, and then we'll be able to get to your questions. And then even if you want to see me build something directly in MailerLite, I can do that as well. But a couple of things here. So for example, you can ask them, which cover do you prefer? This is a chance for you to, for example, maybe just add some fun to your newsletter. Right? Do you like the cover of book one or book two better? Which one do you prefer? This is actually kind of relevant because we talked about Facebook ad targeting. And a lot of the time you need to use images in Facebook ads, that sort of thing. And maybe the artwork that you have for book two is just much more appealing to your target reader than the artwork for book one, right? You could ask that question: which cover's artwork do you like the best? So slightly different phrasing on the question than what I have here, but that could be a way for you to get some input on that. And maybe everybody likes book two's artwork, and that's the primary image you want to use in your Facebook ads. There's an example. And then it could also be an opportunity for you to like let them choose, like, what's the book cover going to be? Here's my upcoming release. Here's cover option A and cover option B. You decide. And you can leave it up to fate there if you feel brave, right? So maybe we'll select cover A. Now here's another interesting one. How likely are you to recommend my books to a friend? Right? So you can just get some information from this if you really wanted to. Like maybe they're going to say 10. Oh, yeah, I recommend your books to everybody. It's great. I blab about you all the time. But you can actually use this information to be like, okay, well, if they said, seven or better, maybe I can specifically come back and target some of those subscribers with opportunities to do just that, right? Maybe target them with opportunities to share some stuff on social media, maybe to provide them, uh, you know, gift copies of certain books that they can give to friends or family, right? Lots of different things you can do. Obviously, some people are going to say one. Yeah, no, I don't do that. Right. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't like your books. Somebody can love your books and not be likely to recommend your books to someone because they just don't like to do that. And so, all right, understand that the information that you're getting here, it's not necessarily whether or not they like your books, it's how likely are they to recommend them. But this is just an example, right? And so obviously they're going to say 10, right? So this is that question that I posed earlier, right? Which social media platforms do you use? In this case, this is a multi select here, so they can come and select multiple items in this multiple choice. So they can say, yeah, I'm on Facebook and I'm on YouTube and I'm on TikTok, but not Instagram, right? Or what have you. And then you can use that information to determine which platforms you should really be on. TikTok, there's TikTok gets lots of talk, but if your subscribers fit your reader profile and they're the type of readers who are going to like and enjoy your books, and they're not on TikTok, that means you don't have to be on TikTok, guys. If you're looking for an excuse to not have to be on TikTok, right? Right? Maybe your readers just aren't there. And so this can give you some information on that. But maybe they are on Instagram, right? Or Facebook. And that's where you want to focus your time and energy on. YouTube is a hard one to crack. That's where I am, just because it's a platform that I use a lot and I understand it. But I know more of my readers are probably on Facebook, and I've kind of accepted the fact that I have to adapt to that. So anyway, so we'll select those options and submit. And here again is another example of an Ask Me Anything, right, where they can submit a question. I guess I have this in here twice, but this is great for, like I said, Q&As or an Ask the Author style. This is really great if you're looking for this content on social media. right? Maybe you're starting with doing TikTok or what have you, and you just want to get people asking you questions so that you can answer those questions and have an excuse to make content. Here you go. Right. So, what inspired you to write? Right. That might be a question that they might ask, right? Just for example. So uh, this one's kind of an inside joke. Another one, another member of the BookFunnel team has a very strong opinion about maps at the beginning of books, fantasy books in particular, right? And so, do you like that or do you not like that? This might be kind of a fun thing to do, but you can just get a gut reaction this way with these like or dislike options. It's not going to be the same as like rating your book on 5 stars, but maybe you're going to ask them, how do you feel about the main character dying at the end of the first book, right? A Game of Thrones type of thing, or maybe at the end of a series. You feel good about that, or do you not like it? And you can get some of these gut reactions from them, and maybe hey, they dislike maps at the beginning of books, and you're like, okay, maybe I don't put the map at the beginning of the book. Maybe it's supplemental, and the people who want to find it can find it. That's just an example there. And that's the last example that I have in this particular case, right? But there's plenty of other things that you can do beyond just this. But we need to get to questions. So that's what we're going to go to next. Kelly and Emma, welcome. Well, you guys have, I'm not going to say welcome. You guys have been here the whole time, but hi.
Hello.
So what do the people want to know today?
Okay, so Leanne is asking if you choose to hide it, I believe this is the answers to the surveys. If you choose to hide it from people who have already answered, what happens when I change the questions in the survey?
Yeah,
Will people who will people those people see the survey again, or would I need to create a completely different survey?
sure. So I can tell you how that works in MailerLite. You have the option to actually change that as well, who it's hidden from and who sees it. So if you go in and you change the questions, you can also change who that survey is hidden from. And this is really best if you are adding that reader to a specific group in MailerLite after they answer the survey, either after they complete it or they answer it a certain way. And then you can choose to hide it from that group. So they complete the survey, they get added to a group, and then anybody who's in that group can't see it. And so it's just hidden from them and they don't see it at all, right? So you can change that as well. So if you change the questions in the survey at some point, and I would be careful on that. You don't want to change the questions too frequently, especially if you're trying to get some data over time, right? If you change the questions up like every week, right? That might be nice for like a fun survey where you're just asking them like, what do you think about this new TV show that's relevant to your genre or what have you, right? But if you're wanting to get data over time, you'll want to keep those questions for a while, depending on how frequently you send your newsletter. But if you do need to change them for any reason, yes, you can. You just would need to then change which group it is hidden from, right? So that it is then visible to that subscriber again if it's a different question. Sometimes this means you have to create a new group, right? For the answer to that specific question that you're introducing. But you can do that as well. You have some control over that.
All right. The next question is from Haha Anonymous, also known as Emma. Um, and Emma would like to know, how are you collating all the data from the surveys? Because if you have an individual survey in each newsletter and you'd prefer to see all the data, I'm trying to think, is there a way where it automatically can get saved in, or are you just going to have to manually transfer it all over?
It depends on the tool that you're using. So with and where the survey is being answered. So like if you're using Google Forms, uh, I think there might be a way to integrate that where some of that data can get added as a tag or something to that effect,
Okay.
depending on the service that you're using. So you can do that sort of thing. A lot of other tools allow you to do the same thing. the nice thing about doing it with in-house, right, with your mailing list service itself, I happen to use MailerLite, but I know other services it's the same way. So maybe not all of them, right? But with MailerLite, at least, a lot of the time, what I'm doing is I'm putting them into a group based on their answers.
Okay.
So, for example, they're rating my book on a scale of 1 to 5 stars. If they answer with 4 to 5, they go into a specific group. If they answer with 1 to 3, they go into a separate group. And then automations can trigger from that. And they can be in multiple groups, and it's not the end of the world. It does mean I have a lot of groups, right? And you have to keep them organized. But that's one way that you can do that as well. And so you might have somebody, and that also helps you later on. You can see, okay, this person is in the group that showed interest in my review team. They rated my book as 4 to 5 stars, and they've read the whole series. Okay, right? And then there's this person over here who rated my book as 1 to 3 stars, and they never read book 1, so that's kind of interesting. So they're probably talking about, you know, my reader magnet or something, and it just wasn't their cup of tea, right? And they haven't responded to other surveys or what have you. So that's how I tend to manage them, but there's a number of ways to do it. Usually it's best if you have some way of segmenting them out and then targeting them. So if your service, your mailing list service allows you to target by segments or by groups or lists, whatever the terminology is, right? That's how you'd want to sort them out so that you can send a campaign maybe specifically to that group, right? So for example, I have a new release coming out myself in May, which is creeping up on me. And you know, if I wanted to send out some review copies here in the weeks leading up to that, I have a list of readers who have already showed interest and expressed that they like my books and that they'd be willing to review and that sort of thing, and I can send that to them. So that's you want to get them organized as best you can within your mailing list so that you can target them from your mailing list. Sometimes with certain tools, that might mean you have to import data. I would try to avoid doing things manually as much as possible, just because if you're getting a lot of data, having to do that manually all the time,
Gonna
human
stop.
nature being human nature being what it is, you're going to do it once and then you're going to forget to do it another time, and then it's just going to languish, and you're going to have the survey that's gathering in data, right? So for me personally, I know the survey has to immediately tag them, move them to a group, add them to a segment, do something, right? So there's a consequence of them answering the survey. It puts them in a group that I can then target, right? In the case of MailerLite, and then an automation triggers, or I have planned that I'm going to, right, send a campaign specifically to that group. Maybe it's not an automation, maybe it's a specific campaign, or maybe now, right? For example, another thing that you can do, and this is not necessarily just with surveys, but if you have somebody who's like, they've read and reviewed book 1 and you've verified that, and then you have them on a specific group, they've gone through maybe an automation sequence, and then you can trigger that to show them, you know, hey, would you like to, you know, review book 2? You liked book 1, or, you know, that sort of thing. So that just as an example, there's ways to do that. But yes, I would try to use whatever automatic methods there are available, depending on the tools that you're using.
Okay. Jay McDonald is asking, any tips on streamlining surveys if you have two different types of readers on your list? For example, two subgenres of romance.
Right. That's a good question. So if you have two different subgenres of romance, let's use that example, actually. I like that. And you have them on one newsletter, which is totally fine. You can do that. First thing is, you know, there's some legwork that you can do up front here before you get to that point. But maybe your first survey is just asking that question, right? Which subgenre is for you, right? I write in these two different subgenres of romance, but which one do you prefer? Right. And it could be maybe that multiple choice type of question where it's, I like subgenre A, I like subgenre B, or hey, I like both. And the nice thing about a lot of these survey tools, including MailerLite, and I believe Google Forms can do this as well, is that the next question in the survey is based on their previous answers. So if they say, oh, I like subgenre A more, well, then the next question that you ask them in that same survey is specific for those who gave that answer, right? So you can steer them in a certain path, right? So you don't have to have all that information up front necessarily. It can be helpful if you do. There's, if you have, right, if you're using reader magnets a lot, it's probably helpful to have custom mailing list fields. So you label those subscribers as they're coming in, right? They downloaded the reader magnet from subgenre A, for example. And maybe there's the ones who downloaded subgenre B's reader magnet. And then there's the ones who downloaded both. And you can kind of segment from there. And that can be useful as well. But the problem is you don't want to go making too many assumptions as well. You don't want to assume that just because they downloaded the reader magnet for subgenre A, that they wouldn't necessarily be interested in, or maybe even more interested in subgenre B. Maybe they just haven't figured out that you write that yet. So I would say make as few assumptions as possible when you are crafting a survey, and your first question should sort them, and then subsequent questions from there based on how they answered that. That's what I would recommend. And then it's just a matter of getting enough readers to go through that, so then you can follow up with them later with additional surveys that are maybe more specific, right? So you have all your readers of subgenre. I don't know specifically what type of survey you're trying to implement, but if you're wanting to streamline it, right, it's asking that first question is really important. It should sort them, right? Whether it's asking them, why are you on my mailing list? Which subgenre do you prefer? Right? What have you? You want to sort them first. And that's really what that first question should be if you have a multi-question survey. Hopefully that helps answer that. Yes, it's a sorting hat. Right? That's exactly
Right. Kirsten asks, can you talk more about using rating a book survey questions to prompt reader reviews to actually leave a review elsewhere?
Yeah.
How do you word that request?
Yeah. So I think so. This is the review survey here example that I had. And I don't think for whatever reason, I don't think I set it to allow me to go back. The one thing about surveys is once there's a response, sometimes you can't go back and change them because it has to keep that data without corrupting it. So, but in this case, something like, hey, that's great. I'm glad this is the response they get if they rated it 4 or 5 stars, right? That's great. Awesome that you enjoyed it. Reviews are very important. If you have a moment, please consider writing a quick review. And then this would just be a link to maybe Amazon or what have you, right? I would not just rely on this alone, though. I would also have them get added to a group and then have that trigger an automation. That's going to come back to them a couple days later and say, hey, I just want to reach out because you said you really like my book. I really appreciate that feedback. Thank you so much. If you haven't yet, go write a review here, right? It would help me out a lot. And I would even say, give them the option to say no thanks. And honestly, that's like a further way to filter them, right? So that automation might even have an additional survey component to it or sorting component to it for them to say, yeah, no thanks. I don't review books, right? Because you might have some readers who are like that. I don't review books. That's not a thing I do. I just read them and I rate them in my head, and I don't go and review them publicly. Totally fine. But I would follow up with some sort of automation sequence. Don't just rely on this, right? They're going to open your newsletter. They're going to see the stars. They're going to rate it 5 stars. They're going to see this message and they'll be like, I wasn't planning on writing a review right now, so don't rely on this message alone to do all the heavy lifting for you. Have them get added to a list, a group, a segment, have a tag added to them, have that trigger an automation. Or if nothing else, if you're collecting the data with a Google form or something like that, just take those emails, right? They're already subscribers to your list. If you're sending this to your newsletter, right? So you can take them and import them into a specific group manually and then reach out to them, right? And maybe reach out to them regularly too about this whole thing with opportunities. The soft sell probably works better in the long run if you're talking about phrasing and things like that too.
Okay, Jay McDonald is asking, what is your opinion on providing an incentive to participating in the survey, such as a giveaway as they enter, that they enter if they respond? Can their anonymity be protected if you do this?
Yes, so I think that's great. There's a couple things you could even do with this. It depends. So if it's an open giveaway, like everybody gets it if you complete the survey. Like it's a free book that you get if you complete the survey. I'm gonna have to write one of those now. I'm gonna have to write a new reader magnet. Specifically for that purpose. That actually sounds really awesome because what you would do is you just have them complete the survey. Once they click the complete button, it adds them to, and they've completed the survey. They've actually completed it. They get added to a specific group in MailerLite or list, what have you. Again, whatever the terminology is based on your service. And then they get sent an automation with a link to a BookFunnel restricted page for that reader magnet. So you could do that. But if you're doing a giveaway where you are, actually like giving something away to one person who completes the survey, it's like an entry into a contest sort of thing. Yeah, you can protect their anonymity too. You'll have their email, and you could, when you announce the winner, you could just either, if you have data like their first name or their initials or something like that, you could use that instead of their actual name if you're going to be transparent about that sort of thing, right? Or you would just or you just say that a winner has been chosen, right? You wouldn't want to obviously put their email out there or anything like that. But yeah, if you have a first name, maybe their initials, you can use that instead to announce the winner. I can definitely see how that would be, especially if you're going to do this repeatedly for the people who participate in the survey. It's really helpful for them to see, oh yeah, somebody did actually win. So yeah, you can definitely protect their anonymity in that respect. And that's probably a good thing to do. You wouldn't want to put like their first and last name out there with their country of origin and their email address and all that stuff. You don't want to include all of that data. But yeah, a first name, first and last initials, something like that. Or just their email, not the like their handle, right? The first part of their email before the at, right? You could use that as well because you're not telling anybody like which email service they use. You're just telling them, this person. That's the only way you have to refer to them. So yeah, you can do that. So I hope that answers that question because that's a good way to use surveys as well, actually.
Okay. I've kind of grouped three questions because they're similar from Robin, Katie, and Carol. Um, After getting the results of your surveys, do you sort subscribers according to tags or some other method? Can you use tags instead of groups to decide who sees a survey? And if you're doing a poll, for instance, which cover do you prefer? How do you see the answers? Do you have to send them to a group or segment?
Yeah. So a lot of these will vary on the tools that you're using. It will vary on your mailing list service as well. So on some services, you could add a tag, for example, and different services use that word tag differently. So it's going to depend. On MailerLite, specifically with surveys, I believe there is only the ability to add them to groups from a survey response. You can set up automations that can then trigger to add different things to them, I believe, after they've been added to that group, right? But there's a it's up to you whether or not you'd want to go that extra step. But your mailing list service may organize it differently. So you may only be able to add a tag. Maybe you're adding them to a segment. There's lots of different things like that. I know MailerLite also gives you the opportunity to see the survey results themselves. And so I can check this on the MailerLite app on my phone is what I usually do, but you can also see it when you've sent a campaign that contains a survey. In MailerLite, they give you the ability to see those survey results themselves too. So you can see what percentage of people answered this, that, or the other, right? So you can usually view those in another way, other than just literally having to count and compare, who's been tagged this way or added to this group or added to this segment. All right, so there's going to be a variety of ways that excuse me, folks, there's going to be a variety of ways that it's going to look depending on the tools that you're using. I can only really speak to MailerLite from personal experience because that's what I've used. But maybe if there's some folks who have used other platforms, other mailing list services, maybe you have more insight into those, and you can drop it in the comments for sure if that helps provide some additional context for everybody. But yeah, it will vary. That's important to know. It's going to vary from one to the next.
Okay. Shelly is asking, and actually there was a couple of people who were like, yes, I need this too. Can we in MailerLite get a copy of this survey page?
Oh yeah, actually, I can drop these. Yes, I should be able to do that. I don't think that these landing pages have anything. Yeah, no, yeah. In fact, I can just grab these and drop them in here. They're maybe not the, you'll notice that they are just copies of copies. And that is because I made one and then copied it. So it had the same style and then I copied it. That's why you'll see like the URL as copy 3, that sort of thing. Because I customize the appearance and then it's easier to just replicate that when you're creating a new one. So one thing to keep in mind though is that once you go through the survey is designed to be answered sort of once. So I recommend, you'll notice I'm in an incognito window here. That is so that it doesn't recognize me, right? And I can go through the survey again. Typically, a reader would go through the survey once and they came back to it. MailerLite at least would recognize, hey, you've answered this already. You're done. You don't get to answer this again. So just keep that in mind if you're going to test those out. But yeah.
And David asks, is there a book or online resources that dig deeper into this topic of surveys and setting them up? Good question.
Yes. I don't have specifics, but there's lots of them. I know. Kelly, were you going to speak up there?
Yeah. Newsletter Ninja has, I
Yes.
think, a section on with by Tammy Labreck. Has this, I
Yes.
believe, a section or maybe even like a whole part of her setup of how to put
Right.
surveys, how to use surveys in your
Shame on me for
stuff.
not remembering that, but yes,
I think you were almost there.
yes, that I was about to stumble into that and be like, oh well, no, yeah, there's that. Yes, so that Newsletter Ninja is always a good place. We recommend that book to lots of people. Tammy is a friend of BookFunnel, but also just it's a very informative book. So if you haven't picked that up, it's one of the few books that we actually tell everybody to go and get it, especially if you're wanting to know how to manage a newsletter. But yeah, no, there are plenty of other tools out there and other examples you can find too from authors that are way more sophisticated than even me. um, this is maybe this is a good thing to point out, is that a lot of these questions here, right, this is well within your reach. So I don't want you to feel intimidated by this whole process. If I can do it, you can do it, right? I am by no means a genius, or I'm not the first person to think of this. So yeah, there's plenty of other resources out there. There's probably plenty of other ideas out there from other authors who are implementing this sort of thing in even better ways than I'm thinking of right now. Right. So yes, there's plenty of information to be had out there. It's not something that gets talked about a whole lot. But I think you can find it if you go and look for it. I should say also that one of the other things that we want to talk about eventually, and I'm thinking of this as a future topic for a webinar, is just how to have a more effective newsletter in general. And so this is one thing, is these surveys that you can add, but there's some other stuff that I want to talk about too. And I think in May we will actually be doing a newsletter focused webinar on what are some of the tips and tricks on making your newsletter more effective for whatever it is you are trying to do with your newsletter. And I think just talking about that generally as well. So we will. Oh, I think I see. Is this another? Yes. Okay. So yes, a newsletter webinar would be great. Yes, it would. And to give you like just a little preview, I formulate my newsletter in blocks. So I include 4 or 5 blocks of content in the newsletter, and I do very visual newsletters, less text, more pictures, and I send them somewhere else. I don't want them to stay in their email client and for very long. I want them to go somewhere else. But that's something that we can talk about more in another webinar. I see there's some folks asking about a preview in MailerLite of building one, and I have that. We can do that here. Let me just switch over.
While you're pulling that up, I was going to mention back in the 2022 20 Books convention, Melanie Harlow did a whole presentation about why would you give them spaghetti when they want cake? And it was a lot of questioning her audience to dial down what they liked about her books, exactly what they wanted and when they saw her books. And then it changed how she was writing her books so that when the next books come out, they're like, they're like dialing in on that butter, like Theodora Taylor says, that good stuff that her readers specifically wanted. And it actually increased her revenue significantly because the readers were like gobbling it up. That's exactly what I wanted, that cake. I didn't want spaghetti.
Right.
So
yes. And that character that everybody hates, but they hate to love, maybe, that you better keep them around, that sort of thing. This reminds me, the example I have is too obscure and really shows that I'm a millennial. So
sorry, I was actually trying to hunt that down.
Oh,
what down? Oh, Melanie Harlow.
Melanie Harlow. I'm like, oh,
you know what? I have it. I didn't know if you have to be in the group, but I can drop it in there and see if you're in the group.
Drop that in the Zoom chat. But the thing that makes me think of is how was it? I think this example would be a little bit more within a little more relevant to everybody, which is, I think, like Han Solo, I believe, was only supposed to be in A New Hope, but he was a popular enough character that they kept him around, or Lucas kept him around. He wasn't planning to, if I remember correctly, things like that. So like maybe you find out from your readers, oh, they really like this character, they really like this villain, and if you killed them off, that might not have been the best. So anyway, here we are building a survey. This is how it looks in MailerLite. It's going to be different if you're using another tool entirely. And so here we actually have several questions in this survey that I've already added. So this is our intro. So I can edit this and change the question that's being asked. I can change what the button will say, for example. And then I can go to the subsequent questions in this survey. And so this is where I can change these things. So like, for example, what do you think about maps at the beginning of books? Maybe I want to ask a different question. I can change that out. I can also customize a lot of things in here too. But if we wanted to add a new question, right? So somebody drop a question in the Zoom chat or on Facebook, and I'll make it. Right? Because we have quite a few options to choose from. We can do a satisfaction score, and there's a variety of different tools here. So this is a smiley face option. I closed out of that too soon, but we can also do stars. This is that one that I recommend using because it obviously, makes sense, right? If you want them to rate your book and then eventually write a review, or you can even use hearts as well, and you can change those colors to customize them, that sort of thing, and so forth. So, what requests do we have in the chat?
Anonymous would say, have you heard of my books before now? Because I was thinking that'd be really interesting. Like, how many
Yes.
times have they seen you before they finally clicked on your newsletter magnet? Like,
There you go. There you go. So that would be if it's simple yes, no. I mean, so the like dislike, unfortunately, is just kind of like, well, it's like or dislike. It's not really a yes, no. So I would use a multiple choice and be, have you heard of my books before now? So this might be like a question you ask new subscribers. Like this
yeah,
is the welcome sequence, maybe, right?
that's what I was thinking.
Um, right. And then you'd be like, yes, I have, right? And I usually, whoops, I usually like to make it like not just a simple yes or no, but like a yes, I have. So it's very clear what they're saying, or like, no, I just found them, right? Something like that. Because this can be pretty effective. Or maybe I'm not sure, right? Something like that. That might be another option there, right? Just for example. So yeah.
So, can you demonstrate too, if it's simple, what the follow-up question would be? Like, for instance, if they said, no, I haven't, or whatever,
Yep.
you'd be like,
So
well, what made you click now? So,
yeah. So you could be like, um, yeah, we would just maybe add another multiple choice question. So you'd be like, okay, great. Um, what made you click or my books this time? However you want to phrase it, click on my books, whatever it is. Maybe that's not the best way to phrase it, but I'm thinking on my feet here, guys. I loved the cover. I read the blurb, or someone recommended you, right? So there's some examples, right? And then what we would do is we would go into the rules and add rules for
okay.
your survey. This is in MailerLite. It might be different in different tools, but you add a rule and we say, have you heard of my books before? And it's answered with a specific answer. And we'll say, no, I just found them. And then we're going to skip to the question here. And so it directs them to this question, right? And then we can add that rule. Oh, well, I guess I just added another rule. But if I wanted to ask a different question for those, right, if we go back here, if somebody says, yes, I have, and maybe we want a different question template for them, then we could formulate that and be like, oh, well, whatever the case might be. And then, so there are rules to send them to one question or the other.
Elise says, bring out the flow charts. Yeah.
Yes, no, yeah. Flowcharts are really going to be helpful. I like to write these things down on paper, honestly, to see like where they're going to go. It can get a little confusing. There are some limits also on the number of rules that you can have. So I think MailerLite caps it off at 10 rules, which can be a little restrictive, especially if you're doing multiple things, like they're answering a question and then getting sent to another question, but they're also being added to a group. You have to have 2 rules for that. And so there's kind of a limit on, how far you can, how complicated you can make these things in certain cases. So
But in theory, your first question could be like demographics. How old are you? Well,
yeah,
I'm in romance, so I'm assuming everyone's female, but you could then see the difference between like the 40-year-olds and the 30-year-olds and the 20-year-olds.
yeah. Just ask, point blank, excuse me, what's your age, gender, what's your dress size, that sort of thing. I'm kidding.
Don't ask them that.
No, 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 no. Don't ask them that. That's, or yeah. What's your mother's maiden name? The last 4 digits of your social security number? Yeah. Yeah. We want to stay away from those things. So I see DK asks here, he's on, he or she, actually, I guess I can't tell. They are on a MailerLite. Where do I find the surveys to start one? So here, if I exit out of this is a landing page builder, but it's going to be similar to the way you build campaigns where you have blocks. Blocks will typically be on the left-hand side when you're building a newsletter campaign, but you can find the survey block in here for a landing page. One thing to note, you can only have one survey per landing page or newsletter. When you're sending with MailerLite, it can't have multiple surveys, so you can only send one at a time. So just keep that in mind. You can also do quizzes, which I guess we didn't really cover today, but those can be fun too. Like if you want to quiz them on, this could be a fun thing to do actually, where you have a quiz at the end of each book, kind of like a homework assignment, I don't know. Maybe that's a little too out there, but yeah. So yeah, Catherine, if you've got to go, no worries. The replay of the whole thing will be available on bookfunnel.com/videos a little later today. So you'll be able to go back and watch whatever you missed. Yeah, Robin says, don't assume your romance readers are female. I found some of my very engaged paranormal romance readers were male. I met them at a sci-fi conference I spoke at. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and I myself writing in sort of space opera, military sci-fi, I do have a contingent of female readers as well, even though that's predominantly military sci-fi in particular, predominantly male readers, but there's a lot of female readers in that genre as well. So yeah, you don't want to assume. You don't want to assume.
I know I have some male readers of my orc romance, which shocked me because one of them reached out on Instagram and I was like, interesting. Orcs, huh? Okay.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. One of these days we should collaborate on something. I think that could be interesting.
That would be awesome, man.
A sci-fi romance with orcs and military science.
Yes,
I like it.
That's kind of what I write, but I'm soft on the military know-how, so
yeah, I can handle that part. I can handle that. I don't know how my readers would respond to it, but
okay, I think that's pretty much the last of the questions for today.
Yeah, I'll just try to maybe rifle through a couple more things here if I can. Let's see, is there anything? Oh, so here, like a sign up form, like, well, this is just the default. Would you like to subscribe to our newsletter? It could also be, would you like to join the advanced reader team?
And is this as sophisticated as the formatting options get, or can you add like colors and images and things
Oh yeah, so you can come in here in your settings and you can control like spacing and you can make it, oh, I don't know what I did. It disappeared. Oh well. Is it going to come back? Good. Okay. You can adjust size and things like that. Allow them to go back to the previous question, show the progress in the survey as well. And then change background colors. You can add background images. Okay. So you can do a lot. This is just very basic for the purpose of demonstration today. But yes, you can change fonts and text size and text colors and button colors and lots of other stuff. Probably some limits, in terms of like overall customization for sure. But yeah, you have a lot of things to choose from there. Ooh. Right. Oh, yep, and it jumps back every time. But yeah. Oh, we got another awesome. Okay. Well, I think we'll wrap things up here for today, folks. I want to thank you for joining us. If you have any questions about this, feel free to reach out either by email. You can reach out to support@bookfunnel.com, of course, and then reach out to us there if you have questions and you want to follow up. Thank you for watching. Check out these other videos from BookFunnel, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.